afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. My name's Dianne Hurst, and I'm the councillor that's going to be chairing this meeting today. I'll just go around the room for the members to introduce themselves. There are officers sat at the top table here who are going to help run the meeting, and there are members in the floor of the council chamber who will be making the decisions. So I'm going to go round, starting with Peter Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Peter Garbutt. I'm Councillor for Nether-Edge and Sharrow.
Thank you, Peter. Back on through Brian.
It's Councillor Brian Holmshaw, Councillor for Broomhill and Sharrow Vale.
Chris.
Councillor Chris Rosling-Josephs, Councillor for the Baton Ward.
Zahira.
Councillor Zahira Naz, Darnell Ward.
Councillor Tony Dams, Councillor for the Southey Ward.
Pete.
Peter Price, Councillor for Shire Green Brightside.
Thank you. And across to Bob.
Councillor Bob Mccann, Baton Ward Councillor.
Roger Davison, Ecclesall Ward Councillor.
Thank you. Andy.
Councillor Andrew Sangar, Councillor for Forward Ward.
Round the corner to Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Richard Williams, Bannington Ward.
Councillor Alan Woodcock, East Ecclesfield Ward.
Councillor Garry Weatherall, Shire Green Brightside Ward.
Thank you, everybody. I'll hand over to John now for the housekeeping arrangements.
Yeah, there's no fire alarm expected, so in the event of a fire, please follow one of us straight through the anteroom, down the stairs, out of the main entrance. And I think we're all familiar where the toilets are. Yes, okay, thank you.
I don't believe we have any apologies, do we, John?
No apologies, Chair.
No, thank you. And there are no items on the agenda which warrant the exclusion of public and press.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask any members if they have any declarations of interest to make, please? I can't see any indications, so I'll take that there are no declarations of interest. Could we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, please? And they're on pages 9 to 12 of your agenda pack. Can I have them? Can someone nominate them as an accurate record, please? Thank you. So that's Peter and seconded by Garry. Thank you. I'll go through them page by page for matters arising. Page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, no matters arising. Before we go on to the next, before we go on to consider the applications that are tabled at this week's meeting, I'm going to hand over to Lucy because she's got a report to make to members. Oh, Peter, yes, sorry, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The next item on the agenda was site visit. We did a site visit this week, but I would have liked very much to have had it extended to the other applications too. And I wondered if there was some reason why we weren't taken around those sites as well.
The only reason that we usually go on site visits and officers will come in here is if we have if a site is of strategic interest or if there are many objections. I think the site that was listed as being on a site visit had quite a number of letters both for support and objections. We did discuss I think it's the West Bar site you're probably talking about, Peter?
Both West Bar and the Farm Road, but I'd have liked to have seen both of those, yes.
Well, there's nothing to stop you going to see them independently. But I mean, we did discuss going on a site visit to the West Bar site, but felt that there wasn't anything that could add materially to the slides that officers are going to be showing us today, because there was nothing physically on the ground to consider as options. And if for any reason, I think the only thing I can say is if for any reason you feel that when you see an agenda published, there's some reason that you think members may benefit from having a site visit, that you contact Peter and myself and we just talk it through, and then we can represent that to officers. It's as simple as that. We will go and look, and many of us do go and look if we don't know the site, independently of any organised site visits. Andy, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to back Peter up on this. Just to say several things. One is that the site visit we had was very useful. It was a difficult site, and getting to the site was very, very useful. And you know, I fully accept that not everybody can get to the site visits. But it was useful. I think the only learning point, and it's my responsibility as much as anybody else's, is to make sure we agree one meeting point and not three separate ones. But that's, I'd say, I'll take the responsibility on myself to make sure I know where I'm going. But I take Peter's point that we've obviously had COVID, so that's been very strange. But before that, we got into a very good habit of going to most of the sites that are contentious. And I just think I fully agree with Peter that the West Bar one, I think we would have gained something by looking at the sites. And at least having an officer there, you can have a chat about some of the planning issues there informally, and you can see the site. And so I take Peter's point. I think in general we should have as many of the items that come here that are contentious that we should go on site visits. But thank you, Chair. I know everybody's doing their best, and I know it's August and all that.
Thank you for your contribution, Andy. As I say, if members do feel that there is a site that's been missed off, or that there is specific difficulties connected with the site that it would benefit us from seeing, then please do speak to either Peter or myself as co-chairs, and we'll, there's no resistance to having site visits. It's just that we try to, people have been going independently to site during the period of COVID, and we try to pick the ones that are the most contentious to go and visit. Just for the record, the site visit on the agenda at number 8, yes, the Monday morning before the next planning meeting, if there are any site visits, officers will contact members in advance of that with the agenda and meeting point. Thank you. So, to pick up where I left off, I'm going to bring Lucy in now because she has a report for members. It is covered in the supplementary, but she's made a specific item on the agenda at my request because she has got something to report that is of material consideration for members in making the decisions on today's meeting. So if I hand over to Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I go on to that, just to reiterate the point about site visits, there's clearly absolutely no resistance to going on site visits at all. I think what we felt with the two that are close to the ring road is they're very accessible to members to go and visit independently. And obviously with the West Bar scheme, that's also on the back of an outline planning approval that set the principles for development. So there's certainly no resistance to going on site visits. It was just a consideration that we reached a judgment on those particular ones. Chair, what I wanted to bring to members' attention, and no doubt most members will now be aware because I think there has been some publicity on this matter, is the 5-year housing supply and the council's updated position. As you know, a key government objective is significantly to boost housing supply, and all local planning authorities are expected to maintain a 5-year housing land supply of specific deliverable sites, including an appropriate buffer. Sheffield's housing requirement is currently 2,923 net additional homes per year, and this is based on the government's standard methodology for calculating local housing need. We are required to use this because our local plan is more than 5 years old. We are required to also apply a 5% buffer to ensure choice and competition in the market for land. The 5-year housing requirement is therefore 2,923 times 5 years, plus a 5% buffer. So the additional total is, in that 5-year period, is 15,346 net additional homes. Following changes to planning practice guidance in December 2020, as one of the 20 largest urban areas, Sheffield is required to incorporate a 35% uplift into that local housing need figure. So the revised requirement of 2,923 homes per year applies from the 16th of June this year and is therefore significantly higher than previously, with a knock-on effect on the deliverable supply. Obviously, the 5-year housing land supply is important because if there is not a full 5-year supply, the most important local plan policies for determining any of the relevant applications for housing are automatically out of date, and the presumption is in favour of sustainable development. And this is referred to as the tilted balance, which we have referred to in the past in committee reports. In that situation, planning permission should only be refused if the adverse effects of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the National Planning Policy Framework as a whole. National Planning Practice Guidance sets out the approach that should be used to determine whether sites can be classed as deliverable and therefore whether they can be included in the 5-year supply. We are now assessing that there is a 4-year supply of deliverable housing sites in Sheffield for the period 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2026. The assessment we've done follows government practice guidance and is based on available evidence on construction programmes and development constraints, as well as reflecting the number of sites currently available for development. The impact of the 35% uplifted requirement without a corresponding increase in supply means that we are no longer able to demonstrate a deliverable 5-year supply of land for new homes. Recent inspectors' decisions on the Hepworth and the Hollingbusk sites concluded that Sheffield does not have a 5-year housing land supply and that the tilted balance therefore applies. This means that we need to reflect this position in determining planning applications with immediate effect. The updated 5-year housing land monitoring report will be published shortly and will provide greater detail of the sites for inclusion and the methodology used in determining the supply position. And this will provide an update on evidence that was used during the inquiries above and will reflect the position at the 1st of April 2021. So, Chair, obviously there are a couple of applications on this agenda that are impacted by that 4-year supply. So we have included supplementary information on those 2 relevant applications, but obviously it's a really important consideration that members need to be aware of.
Thank you, Lucy. I've got an indication from Councillor Peter Price that he wants to ask a question.
Yeah, just a quickie. The fact that part of our city comes under the Peak Park Planning Board, does that make any impact or effect on the total requirement or who makes the decisions?
No, it makes it more difficult to achieve because obviously part of Sheffield City Council's boundary is not under our planning control, so it does make it quite challenging for Sheffield, yes.
There's no requirement of the other planning to take it under consideration who covering part of our city?
As it stands at the moment, no, there isn't.
I've got Councillor Sangar and then I've got Councillor Garbutt indicating. Councillor Sangar?
Yeah, thank you very much for the update, Lucy. I mean, just following on from Peter's point, so out of the 20 large urban authorities, how many others have got part of a national park in them?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, sorry.
Okay, and the other thing was you said there was going to be a a fuller written report. And so when can we have that? And did you say something about trying to find sites to move to a 5-year supply, as in terms of response to the 35% uplift? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, obviously, the search needs to be reflected in the emerging local plan. This is not a piece of work that we are personally involved in, the officers around this table, so I won't be able to answer detailed questions. I just thought it was important to set the scene. The report is almost ready, and it will be published when it's ready.
So I suppose for members of this planning board, clearly we had a period where we had, as we have today, several reports with a tilted balance. So how long do we have to wait while we have every report, where we have to, for housing, we have to use the tilted balance? What sort of time period are we talking about where we have to keep that tilted balance?
Until we can demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, so a long time.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Garbutt.
Thank you very much for the report, Lucy. Which I look at as bad news, because it means that there is even less opportunity for us to weigh benefits and disbenefits of particular applications. The tilted balance means we're almost bound to accept an application, and that really makes me feel, well, it fills me with dread. I've been trying to find for a long time the calculations that the government makes on how much housing supply the country needs, and haven't been able to find anything at all. Is there anything that you can help me with, any direction you can point me in about the 300,000 a year nationwide that was determined in 2016?
Lucy?
Chair, as it's not my area of expertise and it's for ordinary planning colleagues, but I can certainly take note of that and ask them for that information if they have it to be sent through to you.
That okay, Peter? I think that's something that most of us in this room would welcome, because it's the tilted balance was always, we had a recent planning training session regarding the tilted balance, and it's always been it's a difficult concept, isn't it, to get your head around, and it has a big impact on the decisions that you're making. So if you could circulate that round, Lucy, I think we'd all appreciate that. Thank you. Right, after that, we're going to reset our minds and give consideration to the application that we've got before us. The first application is number 21/01999/REM, the site of the car parks at Shalesmoor, Bridge Street and Plum Lane, buildings 1A and B. And the proposal is for erection of a mixed-use development comprising 2 buildings up to 19 stories for various uses. And this is an application for approval of reserved matters. So I'll hand it over to the officer now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It might be helpful just, you're on the red line boundary plan, that's fine. I'll tell you when to move it on, Jay, thanks very much. Just a couple of things. Supplementary report number 1. Just an update. In response to Councillor Johnson's concerns, and since the report was published, the applicant and council highways officers have been in further detailed discussions about the design of the cycle infrastructure and the linkages between the works proposed as part of this scheme and the works proposed as part of the Transforming Cities project. And whilst the detailed design doesn't need to be finalised at this stage, because it would be covered with a Grampian-style condition, and that's on both the outline approval that's already gone and on this proposed reserve matters application. A sketch proposal has been produced, which indicates that all the concerns which have been raised can be accommodated because there is enough space available to provide the segregated cycle route. Chair, also following publication of the report, Councillor Phipps raised a concern about wind modelling and whether this included the wider area, especially existing building entrances along mill sands. And having reviewed this in further detail and sought clarification from the applicant's wind modellers, it's confirmed that the computational fluid dynamics study of the scheme included the wider impact on mill sands and shows that all the entrances will be suitable for standing, which is what's required when studying wind impacts. Chair, just a correction as well. There's a note referring to BREEAM Excellent in this report, and actually that's a mistake. That's in the office report because it doesn't apply to residential schemes. So that was just a mistake in this particular report. So that's that relates to the office scheme only. Chair, the next section of the supplementary report, it basically repeats what I just said about the 5-year housing supply. So I'm not going to read that in detail, but just towards the end, basically, obviously the NPPF emphasises the importance of delivery of housing, and that importance is heightened with the tilted balance engaged in this case, such that the recommendation to support the proposed development is strengthened. The provision of 368 new homes with a good mix of sizes, which is studios, 1-bed, 2-bed and 3-bed, will contribute significantly to meeting the current shortfall in this sustainable location, and there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. It is therefore the case that the balance is very much in favour of approving the application as highlighted in the NPPF, and the recommendation to approve the application subject to the listed conditions is therefore reinforced. Chair, if I just go on to the presentation, the next slide shows the aerial photograph, and obviously this shows the proximity of mill sands to the east, which is where a number of the objections have come from. So that's the existing residential blocks that are to the east of the site. The next slide, there's 5 photographs here. The first photograph looks back at the site from the ring road to the north. The next photograph shows the view out of the site towards mill sands. The third one shows the view north along the ring road and with the site to the right-hand side. The next one shows the view out of the site towards Kelham Island. And then the next one, the 5th photo, shows the view north along Bridge Street with the site on the left-hand side. The next site, the next slide. The plan on the left shows the parameters for residential use at the outline stage. And the plan to the right shows the maximum height parameters that were approved at that point as part of the submission. And that shows development up to, well, it equates to about 60 metres in height. It's 109 metres above the ordnance datum, but that equates to about 60 metres on this specific site. The next slide shows the wider illustrative master plan with this site marked as 5 and 6 at the outline stage. So it's at the top northern point of the site. And then the next slide shows the current latest illustrative master plan. And these buildings that you're considering now are buildings 1A and 1B. And then the next slide shows the illustrative landscape master plan for the wider site and also in more detail for this specific site. And then the following slide shows a typical upper floor plan showing the residential apartments. And then the next slide shows the Bridge Street elevation, and this shows the part of the building that drops down where it becomes opposite the mill sands nearest block. The next slide shows the north elevation towards the Relief Road, and the next slide shows the west elevation also towards the Relief Road. And then the final elevations are those which face south towards Plum Lane. The next slide shows a computer-generated image from the north, and it shows it in context with future potential buildings. So that would be future buildings that are forming part of this site. And then the next slide is a CGI which indicates the proposals from the west, but again it has an office block in the foreground which is part of a future phase of development rather than actually being there at the moment. And then the final slide shows these blocks in isolation without that adjoining development happening. So I think the things to note about this scheme are Oh, just one thing I did notice, Chair, that the list of approved plans are under the wrong heading on the agenda, and they should be budged down a notch. They're in the timescale heading rather than the approved plans heading. Obviously, this reserve matters proposal follows the granting of outline planning permission for the wider site back in February 2017. And it's proposed to erect 2 primarily residential buildings with ground floor retail and food and drink uses. Building 1A, which is the one which is parallel to Bridge Street, comprises of 33 studios, 93 one-bed units and 102 two-bed units. And this one is the one that's 10 to 19 stories, and it has a horizontal emphasis, and it's a buff and light grey material of mixed brick. Building 1B, which faces across to Kelham Island, is the red brick building, and this one is 77 one-bed units, 42 two-bed units and 21 three-bed units, and that one is 8 to 15 stories in height. And obviously we do recognise that the scale is significantly taller than the surrounding buildings, but this was always envisaged at this gateway site and was approved at the outline stage. In fact, the earlier outline approval, which is listed in the planning history, proposed even taller buildings at this end of the site. Bridge Street would be widened to increase the distance between building 1A and the Mill Sands Foster building. At the nearest corner, this is 13 metres, but then it widens out to 22.5 metres. And both of these ranges, we believe, are typical of city centre blocks facing each other over streets. And they also reinforce the urban grain. The southern section of the new block, which is closest to the Foster building, is lowered in height to 10 stories to improve the relationship. The proposals are fully in line with the parameters set out at the outline stage. There's also been a microclimate assessment for this scheme that shows that no mitigation is required in terms of wind mitigation for these particular blocks. So if I just run through the benefits of the scheme, Chair, obviously 368 apartments would be delivered, and they are build-to-rent apartments of varying sizes. There would be substantial public realm provision around Plum Lane in the form of Soyo Yard, Soyo Square and all the footways around. There would be sustainable urban drainage rain gardens on Corporation Street, which link to the council's grey to green scheme. There would be solar panels or air source heat pumps or heat recovery systems to deliver 10% renewable energy. There would also be cycle parking, green roofs, low energy lighting, and again, sustainable urban drainage for the wider public realm works. So, Chair, we believe that the benefits of the scheme far outweigh the disbenefits, and obviously it's really important that you remember that this follows an outline approval. So this is the details following the parameters that were set as part of the outline approval, and together they form a full planning approval, if you like. So all the principles were established at the outline stage, so we're not able to change the principles of the development as part of this. So, Chair, I think that's where I'll leave it for now. Obviously, I understand you've got a speaker in support of the scheme, so I might just be in danger of repeating something that they're likely to cover, Chair.
That's wonderful, Lucy. Thank you. We do have a speaker, yeah, and I can see we have a specialised runner today without Joe having to go and fetch the speakers in. While we're waiting, we've got Mr. John Suckley coming to speak for this application and also for the next application, which is linked. Can I just ask, Roger and Andy, are you okay with the screen behind you? Because we've only got one screen in here today, and I only realised when the meeting started. Or is it Richard that's? You're following it on your laptop. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to check because usually when we've been in here, we've had the screen to each side. So it's not ideal, but there you go. Just talk amongst yourselves while we get our speaker in. Mr Suckley is going to speak on both of them, and I think really with the meeting's approval, I'll just ask him to remain in the room while the officer, while we go through. I can ask him to sit in the anteroom while we ask questions, if you like, but normally people, when we've been in the reception rooms, speakers are sat in there, aren't they, listening to what we say. So when the meeting's approval, I'll just ask him to remain, if that's okay. Yep, I can see nods. Yeah, I'll ask him to remain, and at least it saves that 5 minutes dead air time, doesn't it, while we're waiting. Thank you. Mr Suckley, hello. Welcome to the new unimproved Planning and Highways Committee. The console in front of you gives access to the microphone, and I understand you're speaking on behalf in favour of 2 applications. The meeting has just decided if you could please speak to the first application now, which is 1998 REM, and is it? 999 REM. It's listed the other way on my speaker sheet, and then remain in the room while the presentation for the second, so that you don't have to bail out and then come back in again, if that's okay. So the floor is yours for 5 minutes at your convenience.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I'm John Suckley and I'm the planning agent for Urbo Westbar Limited, a joint venture partnership between local developer Urbo Regeneration and Peveril Securities, a member of the Bowmer and Kirkland Group. Westbar has been an important council-led regeneration scheme, and the proposals before you are a culmination of a significant amount of work since the council identified the site as a strategic regeneration project and issued its development brief in 2014. This resulted in an initial public-private partnership and outline permission in 2007. The original developer, Castlemore Securities, went into administration, and Urbo Westbar Limited stepped in to assemble the site and entered into a development agreement with the council in 2015, securing outline permission for their project in 2017. The council, working alongside Urbo, secured a compulsory purchase order, enabling Urbo to complete the site assembly. The development is now in its delivery stage, with all land ownership secured, and the Reserve Matters applications before you will facilitate construction of the first buildings. Urbo entered into a £150 million funding agreement with Legal & General in 2020 for delivery of Phase 1 of the regeneration scheme, comprising around half of the site. Demolition of all the remaining unused buildings is underway and will be completed shortly. Should members grant Reserve Matters consent, then construction of the build-to-rent scheme will begin at the end of this year. Urbo has worked closely with your officers on this application, and we would like to thank them for their hard work and the recommendation for approval. The applicant has fully considered all feedback received as part of the application, and supplementary information has been provided to the council to address matters raised by local residents and key stakeholders. The proposed development is entirely acceptable for the following reasons. Firstly, the principle of the development has been established for a number of years, and the scheme fully accords with the land use and building height parameters and design principles approved as part of the 2017 outline permission. Secondly, the development proposes a very efficient use of a highly sustainable brownfield site, and the new buildings will form high-quality gateway on approach from Kellan Island and the ring road to the north. As confirmed in the officer's report, the development is well designed and of high quality. The combination of the buildings will reflect both the character of the area whilst adding distinctive and unique development in a key gateway location which supports the regeneration and strategic vision for this part of the city. Thirdly, the development will not have an unacceptable impact on existing residents in terms of loss of light and privacy. The separation distance are considered appropriate for a highly sustainable urban location, and the 2007 outline permission was supported by a sunlight study which found that the impacts of the maximum building height parameters on existing residents was acceptable. Furthermore, most of the proposed development sits more than 10 metres below the maximum height parameters approved in 2017. Fourthly, the development will play a significant role in reconnecting this fragmented part of the city and will incorporate the Greater Green Sustainable Landscape proposals through the entire regeneration scheme. The development will deliver one of the two new significant and fully accessible public spaces known as Soho Yard. Fifthly, no objections have been raised by the Council's Highways Department. Recent meetings have taken place with Councillor Johnson and your Highways officers, and it has been established that the Council-designed Bridge Street crossing and Corporation Street public realm can be modified at the detailed design stage post-planning to improve cycle visibility and create space for segregated cycle route along Corporation Street. Sixthly, a wind assessment has been submitted which concluded that the development and its impact on adjacent existing buildings will be acceptable with regards to wind. And finally, Urbo fully respects the short-term impacts that construction can have. To safeguard against this, a construction environmental management plan and a dust management plan will be submitted to the Council in line with the outline permission for consideration prior to commencement of the development. Baumer and Kirkland, who have successfully delivered a number of projects in Sheffield, are accredited, considerate contractors and will comply with these documents to fully minimise any short-term disruption. In summary, the development will deliver significant and important investment and regeneration benefits for Sheffield. This scheme will deliver 368 apartments, which will make a positive contribution to the Council's housing land supply in terms of the overall quantum of apartments and mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties. The development will see the first two buildings of Westbar's £150 million first phase delivered and will act as a catalyst for the regeneration of the area as a whole, which has been a strategic objective of the Council since 2004. It is therefore respectfully requested that members resolve to grant reserved matters consent in line with your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sugley. If you'd like to turn your microphone off. Thank you. Lucy, do you have any comments to make on the...
Chair, no, I don't think I need to respond to anything there. Thank you.
I'll open it up therefore to members' questions. Any questions? Councillor Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. This is a lot of housing. As you say, it's 348, is it? I think the potential inhabitants are somewhere close to 900. And I'm worried about the open amenity space for those people. There isn't a lot around that area. One of the reasons I would have wanted to go and visit was to scope out what there was in terms of open space for those people. We're all aware, having gone through the COVID lockdowns, that a lot of people crowded into very small spaces creates mental health difficulties as well as anything else. So I was wondering if, was it that the square that was mentioned, Soho Square, something like that, is that all there is? How big is it? What sort of parks are there in the area? I can't think of any. So that's really the point I'm trying to make. I don't think there is enough space in the area for between 500 and 900 people living in this set of flats.
Lucy, would you like to respond?
Chair, Jay, can you just scroll to, I'm not sure, I think it's slide 11 probably. That's, yeah, that one. So this shows on the left-hand side, it shows the illustrative landscape master plan for the whole site, and on the right-hand side for this individual site. So I think a really important part of this proposal is to deliver two new public squares, and they are actually quite spacious. Obviously, there is other open space associated with the riverside, which is on the Nursery Street Pocket Park, is down by the river. There's the riverside walks, there are links to Kelham. But I think the point I would make is, obviously this is a reserve matters submission, so the principle of open space and what was going to be proposed was delivered as part of the outline approval. But I think Sheffield, obviously in its city centre and in its suburbs, has got a really good delivery track record for public realm and public open space projects. And as part of the work that's being undertaken now about neighbourhoods in the city centres, that embraces exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, Councillor Garbutt, is to ensure that there is adequate open space for the people that we want to accommodate living in the city centre. So I think the facilities are adequate, but as I say, that was a fundamental principle of the outline approval, so it isn't something we can deviate from, but in any event, we think this delivers some excellent new public open space which links into our Greater Green projects. And obviously there are bits of open space dotted all around. There's Love Square, for example, that's close to the court building already. All the Greater Green delivers informal open space. So that I think there is quite a lot around here, as well as the riverside walks. So I personally think it's reasonably well catered for a city centre urban site.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Garbutt, that okay? Thank you. Right, I also have Councillor Sangar indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I always find master plans very, very useful. So my question is always, how does this deviate to what was envisaged in the master plan? And the particular point I wanted to pick up was the fact that the vertical elements are not as high as they could have been in terms of what was in the outline. And why is that the case? And what are the other deviations from the master plan?
Lucy, would you like to?
Sorry, I think if you go back to slide number 9, Jay, thank you, which shows the illustrative master plan at that time. The parameters that are set at outline are maximum parameters. So obviously then the detailed design comes at a later stage of reserve matters. I think the other point that I made was that actually the earlier outline approval, which never got the go-ahead, which was many years ago, had even taller buildings at the northern end of the site, whereas these have been scaled back somewhat. But I think that they're about 10 metres lower than the maximum in this area. So, you know, but that's perfectly in line with what was discussed at outline stage. So it's just that we think that combination of heights, there's obviously variety in heights as well, which creates an interesting landscape. So we think that's perfectly acceptable, and they don't need to go up to the maximum heights.
That's satisfactory. Yeah, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Brian Holmshaw.
Hello, hi committee. Mention's been made of a sunlight study, and what I've noticed in the officer's report is a line which says, in terms of daylight and sunlight study, the applicant has declined to submit such a study. And I wondered whether there was any more detail on that, whether there's anything in the email that accompanied that to say why.
Chair, if I can just answer that, it's declined in terms of the specifics of this application, and that's because sunlight and overshadowing modelling was carried out at the outline stage. So the outline application was accompanied by a full environmental statement which covered all the different aspects of the environment, and that included a full microclimate study and sunlight analysis. And obviously that was based on the parameter plans. Can you just go up to 8? Please, Jay. That was based on these parameter plans that showed what height of buildings could be achieved on the site, and obviously the buildings that we've got here are lower than the maximum parameter plans that were proposed at that time. So whilst they've not submitted one in detail for this detailed study, it was covered at outline stage, and that covered the maximum parameters. So we're satisfied that that is an issue that we can't pursue any further, and that was clearly covered at that time.
What I would say is that would sow in the minds of people who are some of the residents who have said that that's a difficulty. That sows in their minds, oh, why is this happening? Why is there no sunlight study? And I don't know whether that can be communicated to residents, because a number of residents have said, we're going to be impacted by this, by the overshadowing. And they obviously don't know that, just as I don't know that it was decided at outline stage.
Chair, it is fully covered in the outline officer report that came to committee at that time. Now, obviously, members have changed since that time. That report is available on the outline application, so certainly direct residents may have changed as well, obviously, in that interim period, but you can direct them to that. Now, clearly, we're not denying that there will be some impact. Clearly, there is going to be impact, and there nearly always is on any city centre, large urban scale scheme. But the impact is at acceptable levels. But yes, it certainly was an issue that was considered at the outline stage, and it was properly assessed as part of the environmental statement.
The next speaker I have is Councillor Peter Price.
Just a quickie, Chair. In the past, we've been criticised for the size of the one-bedroom apartments, and I've just wondered, are we happy that these are up to the things we would like to live in? That's all good.
Chair, I mean, the good thing about this proposal is it's a build-to-rent scheme, and obviously members have seen many times at this committee multiple studio apartment developments. The great thing about this one is that there is a high percentage of different ranges. So there's studios, there's one bedrooms, there's two bedrooms, there's three bedrooms, split across the range, and they are spacious and good quality, which I think we've been crying out for in the city, to be fair.
And the final speaker I've got indicated at this stage is Councillor Ritter-Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the outline permission was given. Since then, time has moved on. Because of COVID, it's questionable whether we need so much office space in the city. Because of the government's 35% increase, we need more housing in the city. One of the conditions talks about a minimum of 51% of the combined development should be for office B1 use. Is it conceivable that we could adjust that? Or does that create a whole different set of problems?
Chair, obviously any applicant can apply to vary a condition of any planning approval. That's not really a consideration for this committee at this time, but yes, if somebody applied to vary that condition, then you would consider the circumstances at that time, and then you may reach a different view. So that is open to the applicant to seek to vary a planning condition.
Is that satisfactory, Richard? Yeah, okay. Peter Garbutt, you indicated, Peter, was that for a question or a comment?
It's for a question, Chair.
Right, final question then. Honours go to you.
First of all, is there any affordable housing in this development? You know, we're crying out for affordable housing. A lot of people can't afford the rent that's charged. Secondly, because a lot of these apartments are 2- and 3-bed, I'm assuming that there will be families there. Thirdly, I'm asking about whether or not there are any apartments set aside for people with disabilities. And I suppose bringing it all together, is there provision in terms of services and outside things available outside for everyone, for people of all ages? Obviously with families, you've got people from age 0 to 18 who will need something to occupy them, and for others there will be a range of other needs as well. So is there something for everybody in here? That's my full question.
Lucy?
Chair, in terms of affordable housing, this is an area of the city where it's a 0% area, and that is something that would have to be been secured through the outline consent as well, because that's a principle of a development, but it is in a 0% area of the city centre, so there's no requirement to deliver affordable housing. In terms of accommodation for people with disabilities, again, because we haven't got that up-to-date policy, that's not an actual requirement. You may want to ask the applicant's representative whether those are included, but in any event, they have to be building regs minimum standard for visitability. In terms of the open space, again, I would say, obviously, this is a partnership with the City Council, so any open spaces try and deliver an element of multi-use for different age groups, as has happened, and as you can hear the excited cries outside from the Peace Gardens as we sit in here. So, you know, the hope is that the landscaping schemes would deliver for a range of different users.
Okay, Peter?
Yes, I've got one more question, if that's okay.
Go on, I'll indulge you.
I recently discovered through my participation in the fire service meetings that the fire service is not a statutory consultee for fire safety. It is for fire access, but not for fire safety. And I know what the answer is going to be, by the way, but I want it in public and I want this to be heard. How can we assure ourselves that the fire safety for these buildings is of a good standard?
Chair, obviously, with this specific application, it was submitted before the 1st of August, and there is a change from the 1st of August. So the fire safety would be dealt with by the building regulations, and it is a really important consideration, but it will be dealt with by them. So, and obviously building regulations do consult the fire service on new build proposals. So it is covered. From the 1st of August, anything submitted after the 1st of August that's above 18 metres in height does require the planning application to be supported by a fire safety plan. So that's a new requirement for any buildings of this height from the 1st of August. I don't think we've actually had any lodged yet that are of that height, but that is a new thing. So that will start to be reflected in reports that come to this committee. So it's going to be known as Planning Gateway 1, and then obviously the building regulations will change as well. So at some point, that hasn't happened yet, but that we will be the first port of call for fire safety.
Can I come back on that?
Briefly?
So you're saying that the building regulations people will consult with the fire service. That's a will, not might or could.
Chair, in terms of the planning requirement, we're required to consult the Health and Safety Executive as part of the change from the 1st of August. So it's the Health and Safety Executive that we consult. I'm saying that Sheffield Building Control, if they're dealing with if our own officers in building control are dealing with these schemes, they do consult the fire service. If it goes to a private inspector, I can't answer the question for a private inspector.
Right, I'll move across from that very important point of information debate, I'll move across to comments now. And first of all, have Councillor Peter Price. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the officer recommendation. I think this is a brownfield site that's been screaming out for development for some time. I think I like the building. I think it's a landmark building and its gateway location, and I think it'll contribute greatly to the regeneration of the area and bring more footfall that adds to the one. I think it's a good development, Chair, and I'm going to fully support it.
Thank you, Peter. I've got Councillor Rosling-Josephs.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm going to support the recommendation on this. I think it's a good place to actually put some tall buildings, and I'm going to say this, I wish it was 91 stories rather than 19. I would disagree with planners. I don't think we should have a maximum height on developments in a city centre, and I think this is one of them places, because it's actually quite next to the river, we can get away with quite a bit of height within the city. I would also ask developers to think ahead, because of the fact that we've now been told we need extra 500 million houses in the next 5 years. Is that right, Lucy? To think about that, and to think about more imaginative use of open spaces. Open space doesn't necessarily have to be on the ground. It can be in the air, like if you look at some of these developments they have in the Far East, in Singapore and places like that, and in Holland, where they don't necessarily have public space on the ground. It's on top of the buildings as well, or even halfway up the buildings, connecting them. So let's have something imaginative. Let's see if we can hit 50 stories before Leeds does. But I fully support this one, Chair.
You would have disappointed us, Chris, had you not made that statement. And now have Councillor Bob Mccann.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a general comment, really. We're putting a lot of buildings up around the city centre, and especially now we're getting 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. Inevitably, there's going to be some children involved. It's human nature. But the thing that does me, right across the city, I see the lack of health service, like particularly GP services, dental services, and there's certainly never ever any plans, any mention of educational provision going forward. So I really would like that, we showed some thought towards, looking for providing for families as well. A lot of me single parents, or shall we say, single occupancy, it's not a problem. But when you're getting couples together, inevitably the children pop out of the world, And I've seen nothing, any of these reports have ever mentioned anything about provision, forward provision for anything of these services. I would like that, the planning department did take that on board, Chair.
Next I have Councillor Sangar.
Thank you, Chair. I shall be supporting the officer's recommendation. It's a brownfield site. It's residential accommodation in the city centre. That's a good thing that we're building. This is built for rent. They're quality, mixed-size apartments, and a mixture of 1, 2, 3 bedroom. And I think the scheme looks quite exciting. So this part of the scheme, very supportive of. I wish the developer every success.
Thank you, Andy. I've got Councillor Brian Holmshaw. Brian?
Thank you. I need to make mention about densification. So densification, making an area denser, can be done in a number of different ways. The cities of the Netherlands, for example, very rarely for their residential go above 5 or 6 stories, whether they have green roofs on top or not. That's for their residential. Paragraph 126 of the NPPF states that the creation of high quality, beautiful and sustainable buildings is fundamental. I do not believe that this development does this. I find it, to be honest, characterless. It does not create extra open spaces apart from very small ones. These are not grass. There is simply not enough green space for the large population of this. It is not good enough for their well-being. It's not enough for their mental health, for other buildings, residents and people around. So I shall be voting against this application.
Thank you, Brian. Gary, did I see you indicate?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to come in. I've got to agree with Chris, Rosling-Josephs. It's in the right place. Just a little bit higher would have done, wouldn't it, Chris? Really, but what we've got is what we've got. And there's going to be a lot of cycling. There's a lot of parks in a mile radius of this. There isn't. All right. Well, I bought around here and born and bred Sheffield, and there is. There's a lot of open space there, and lots of lovely walks at the side of the river. So I'll be supporting this, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Garry. Right, I'm going to proceed to the vote now. And I'm going to go around the room and we're going to do it by roll call. And we're going to start with Councillor Peter Garbutt. Councillor Garbutt?
I will vote against the officer recommendation.
Councillor Holmshaw?
I'll be voting against the officer recommendation.
Councillor Chris R.J.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Peter Price.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Tony Dams.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Zahira Naz.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Bob Mccann.
For the application, Chair.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Andy Sangar.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Yeah, against the recommendation.
I'm sorry, my mind's gone blank. Alan.
For the application, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Woodcock. And last but not least, Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair, and well done, officers. I'll be voting for it, Chair, for the application.
John, is that carried by your written? Okay, so that application is carried. Thank you very much. We now progress to application number, hang on, I better look at my paper because I want to get it right. Application number 21/01998/REM, land at Corporation Street, Spring Street, Water Street, Plum Street and Love Street. And it is an application for approval of reserved matters for proposing details for access, appearance, scale, layout, landscaping and access for an office building with ground floor retail units. And I've said that, haven't I? It's for approval of reserved matters. I'm going to hand it across to officers before I tie myself in any more knots.
Thanks, Chair. Jay, it might be helpful just to put the red line boundary plan up at least for the moment. On the supplementary report number 2, we have had a late representation. I think it was received on Friday, which is from a resident of Coode House raising the following concerns. That the current demolition process is very noisy, that the ongoing construction will be messy, dusty and noisy and very disruptive for residents living close by. That the height and volume of the development should be reduced to reduce the length of the construction activity. That a more detailed sunpath analysis should be undertaken, especially spring and autumn afternoons, as it appears that the development may overshadow the entire street, and that this is an inconsiderate and unfriendly design proposal. Chair, our response to that is obviously disruption from construction is an inevitable consequence of regeneration and development projects. The worst impacts are controlled through a construction and environmental management plan, and that's in consultation with colleagues from the Environmental Protection Service, and that's secured by condition, as we heard earlier. And obviously sanctions are available through the environmental protection legislation if there are unacceptable practices witnessed, so it is covered by their legislation as well. The proposed office building is set a substantial distance away from Coode House because it's on the western edge of the larger West Bar site. Future phases of the development will have a greater impact on Coode House than this proposal, which is at 8 stories high, plus a plant deck, and at the distance away and orientation proposed will have little impact on Coode House in our opinion. Chair, if we go on to the next slide, that obviously shows the aerial photograph, and the site is to the southwest of the site that you've just been considering. And on the next slide, we've got a number of photographs. The first photograph looks north to the site from the west side of the court building. The second photograph is looking east to the site from the Relief Road. The third photograph is looking west towards the site from the north of the court building. Then the fourth slide is looking south to the site from the Relief Road. And then finally the fifth photograph is looking northeast towards the site from the Relief Road. Chair, then the next slide will appear familiar to you. This is the outline illustrative master plan, and on here the site is known as Site 2A. And then the next slide shows the current latest illustrative master plan, and the site is shown as 4A on that drawing. And then the next slide is the illustrative master plan, which again on the left is the wider master plan that you've seen earlier. And then on the right-hand side is the more detailed set of landscape proposals for this particular part of the site. The next slide shows the ground floor plan. And then the next slide shows a typical upper floor plan. And then there are a couple of CGIs, computer-generated images. The first one is showing the building in isolation. And then the next one shows it with future buildings to show some context. So those would be part of the wider master plan. The microclimate assessment in this case shows that some mitigation is required locally to protect the entrances to the buildings, and this would be achieved within the landscaping scheme, but the comfort levels are still suitable for the intended purpose. There's obviously inclusive access to the building and substantial public realm works, and the building is adjacent to one of the proposed public squares. The sustainable urban drainage solution principles will be delivered in the landscaping, as will public art proposals. The nearest residential development to this particular site is Mayfield Court, which is 60 metres to the west, and Coode House, which is 100 metres to the east. So from that point of view, there won't be any impact on residential amenity from this development. So in terms of the benefits, obviously employment is a key benefit of this particular part of the scheme. It will obviously regenerate a brownfield site. It will also be designed to be BREEAM excellent, which is a high sustainability bar. There will be social improvement because there will be investment in the public realm on this semi-derelict site as it stands at the moment. There will be 10% renewable energy delivered through photovoltaics. And there will also be cycle parking, a green roof, low energy lighting, and again, sustainable urban drainage scheme. So, Chair, we think the benefits far outweigh the disbenefits, and this particular site obviously faces the relief road, so it's on a very wide section of road. So we don't see any reason why there would be cause for concern with this particular scheme.
Thank you very much. Now, we have one speaker for this application. We have no speakers against this application. And the speaker for this application is Mr. John Suckley. So, over to you, sir. Again, 5 minutes at your convenience.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon again, members. Urbo has also worked closely with your officers on this application, and we would like to thank them again for their hard work and recommendation for approval. The applicant has also fully considered all feedback received as part of this application, and supplementary information has been provided to the Council to address matters raised by local residents and key stakeholders. The principle of the office development has been established for a number of years, and the scheme also fully accords with the land use and building height parameters and design principles approved as part of the 2017 Outline Permission. The proposed development is also a well-designed, high-quality building. The office proposal has a unique curved form which will ensure that it stands out as a distinctive gateway building. The building is characterised by full-height glazing with horizontal metal panels between floors to the northern and western elevations. The glazing is an irregular pattern and has a vertical emphasis which produces a sleek modern appearance and reflects the contemporary commercial style of the city centre. The office development will also deliver significant and important investment and regeneration benefits for Sheffield, and should members grant reserved matters consent, then construction of the office and public realm scheme will also begin by the end of this year. The development will reuse a prominent undeveloped brownfield site. The office development will create indirect and direct construction jobs and is estimated to create 1,000 to 1,300 operational jobs in a highly sustainable BREEAM Excellent rated building. In conjunction with the build-to-rent proposal, the office development will see the first 3 buildings of West Bar's 150 million first phase delivered, together with large expanses of landscaping, and will act as a catalyst for the regeneration of the area as a whole, which has been a strategic objective of the City Council since 2004. It is therefore respectfully requested that members grant reserved matters consent in line with your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you very much for your time once again.
Thank you, Mr. Suckley. Right, I'm going to open it up to members' questions now. Councillor Sangar.
Yes, Chair. I mean, clearly, we've just been through COVID and office use has changed. So, I think the question is, in terms of this scheme being 51% office, can it be broken into other units? Is there, if the needs change? I mean, I think those of us who've been looking at regeneration of the city centre over the last 20, 25 years, It's very difficult to predict what we need in 10 years' time and the mix of office and shops and residential in this scheme. So what's the flexibility if demand changes?
Chair, I don't think that's a specific question for this specific detailed application, because I think that was something that was answered in terms of the outline approval and the fact that an applicant can apply to vary the mix because they can apply to adjust the conditions as they see fit. So obviously we're dealing with one office block here, which the applicant wants to bring forward, but that doesn't preclude some future proposals to change the wider master plan.
Thanks for that, Chair. I mean, I think the issue I've got in my mind is that a lot of businesses are saying that their future office needs are now much lower than they would have been when they were thinking in 2017, 2018, and that do we all need to think about it in terms of any office scheme. But you're saying in terms of this particular scheme that the details we're doing at this stage, that's not a matter in front of us.
We can only consider what's in front of us, Andy, and we have already approved outline application. Okay. Yeah. I have no more questions. I'm going to members' comments. Councillor Price.
Yeah, just how much I welcome it. I think it's superb, and I must admit the number of high-rise apartments that's going up in the city centre is going to transform our city centre. The footfall is going to increase over the next 5 years. Colossal. I hope the retail world is aware of this, because there's one several just within walking distance currently being built. So I welcome it. I think it's an exciting development. I think it's an attractive building, and I fully support it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. No more comments, so I shall go. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holmshaw.
Thank you, Peter. What I wanted to say was I do welcome the use of BREEAM excellence standards on this development. So it puts me in a quandary how I vote.
Well, it's got to be good in that case then. So we will move now. Now Brian's given me a good in. We will move to the vote. And on this reserved matters application, the officer recommendation is to grant, as with the last, is to approve. So for the reasons set out in the report, I'm going to go round the room. Councillor Garbutt.
On this one, I'll go with the officer recommendation.
Councillor Holmshaw.
On this one, I shall also go with the officer recommendation.
Councillor Rosling-Josephs.
For the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Price.
Support the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Dams.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
For, please.
Councillor McCann.
For the recommendation, Chair.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Sangar. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I can support this for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I've forgotten again. Councillor Woodward.
For the officer's recommendations, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
I make that unanimous. Yeah, thank you, Jim. Right, so that application is carried unanimously. So we move on to the next item on the agenda, application 7C, and that's on your... Oh, yeah, most certainly we can have a timeout. Yeah, we'll let Jay do his... on page 69 of your pack is number 21/01102/FUL. So it's a full planning application for the erection of 336 apartments in a 10 to 23-storey building with the provision of communal indoor and outdoor amenity space, car parking spaces, cycle spaces and landscaping works. And it's on the site of the British Rail Club Sports Ground on Farm Road in Sheffield 2. So over to Jenny for the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application lies on the site of on the junction of Farm Road and Queen's Road. If you could just put the red line boundary up, Chair, thank you. The site at present has just got a former bowling green on. In fact, if you go to the next slide, there you go. So this is an older photograph. So it was the former bowling green, which was used in association with Farm Road Sports and Community Centre, which is on the opposite side of Farm Road. So that's to the east of the development site. Buildings of note are the casino, which is adjacent to the north. I think the next site is just, that's taken from close onto the roundabout. So to the left, you've got McDonald's, and then you've got the Farm Road entrance on the left. The proposal is for a 23-storey tower, which drops down to a 17-storey element, and then to a lower section, which is 10 stories. The application seeks 336 units, 168 one-beds, 142 beds, and 28 three-beds. That's actually a correction in the supplementary as well, so that's just to clarify those numbers. In land use terms, it's an area of open space. To mitigate for the loss of the open space, the applicant is willing to put a contribution of £180,760 to provide sports equipment elsewhere in the city. There's a couple of elevations on at the moment. So these are the elevations from Queen's Road and from the rear from the casino. On the lower section, so on top of the 10th storey element, there is an area of open space amenity area for residents of the scheme. If you go on to the next slide, please. This is just a typical floor layout. So that's the 10th floor. So that does show the open or the amenity space. And it's a mixture of one and two beds predominantly, with a couple of three-bed units as well. All of the units are of a reasonable size. They meet all of the space standards with regards to the South Yorkshire Residential Design Guidance, with the exception of some of the one-bedroom units, which are slightly under, and they're about 1 to 2 square metres smaller, so only very slightly under those figures. As regards to affordable housing, a contribution is to be made for an off-site contribution. Again, there's an amendment in the supplementary. This figure should read as £565,000. The scheme is in a sustainable location. It has a number of, on the top of the 23rd storey and on top of the 17th storey elements are solar panels on top of the entire roofs. So it will produce its 10% renewable energy. It incorporates suds. There is a culvert that goes under the site, so there'll be suds within the site that will then go out into the culvert. I think I'm going to leave it there because I know that the speaker for the application is the planning agent, who may wish to elaborate a bit more on some of these points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Could we have one speaker for this application? We have no speakers against this application, and the speaker for this application is Tom Breesling. Thank you, John. Tom, welcome to the Planning and Highways Committee meeting. That's it, you can take your mask off so we can see your face now. The button in the centre of your console is your microphone, and you have the floor for up to 5 minutes at your convenience. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon all. The proposal before you represents the culmination of a detailed and iterative design process involving significant and constructive cooperation between your officers and the project team. The whole application process has been extremely positive, and the resulting scheme is one that everyone involved is really excited about and proud to present to you here today. On behalf of the applicant, I would therefore like to thank all of those who have helped in getting us to this stage. This exceptionally well-designed tall building responds directly to the Council's stated objectives to define key gateways with landmark buildings that announce arrival into the city centre and improve legibility. It will become a welcome focal point, dramatically improving several key vistas from both the city centre and across the Sheaf Valley. This development will also play an important role in realising the Council's ambitions to foster the creation of new and revitalised residential neighbourhoods within the city centre and inner city areas. Furthermore, the site's highly sustainable location is evident through its proximity to a great range of public transportation options at Sheffield Midland Station and via the Supertram network, feeding directly into the positive sustainability criteria set out for new developments within both national and local policy. Informed by guidance from your officers, the building achieves an incredibly high standard of design, making it a standout project for this part of Sheffield. Well-defined fenestration demonstrates a clear hierarchy, whilst window reveals, brickwork modelling and projected masonry piers have all been carefully employed to create a visually satisfying effect. The resulting building represents a real step up for design quality, which if approved will establish a new precedent, helping to drive up design standards for tall buildings across the city. Away from the architectural merit of the building design, it is important to note that all technical matters have been resolved to the satisfaction of officers and external consultees. In particular, Sport England are satisfied that the removal of the current open space designation will be appropriately mitigated for, with a £180,760 payment from the developer to fund sports facilities elsewhere in the city. From a space standard perspective, the development affords good levels of amenity and offers ample opportunities for residents to socialise and forge a sense of community. Many apartments have an external balcony, and all future residents will enjoy access to communal facilities, including a gym, social seating area, co-working area and a rooftop terrace. On top of this, the landscape public realm that wraps around the perimeter of the building will provide high quality and usable green space. In terms of the wider public realm and the interaction between the building and the street, the existing stone wall which currently surrounds the site will be retained for the most part, with a punch through along Farm Road to allow for access to the car park, bike store and for refuse collection. On Queen's Road, the height of the stone wall will be reduced to 1.2 metres with planting placed behind, whilst a break in the front of the main entrance of the building creates an active frontage. This allows the most visible part of the development to have a dynamic street scene without being impeded by vehicular access points. In conclusion, the application before you proposes a development of exceptional design quality that interacts well with its surroundings, and the overall impact on the wider area will be wholly positive. Furthermore, given the recent planning inspectorate judgment that Sheffield is not currently meeting its 5-year housing land supply target, it is important to acknowledge the significant contribution that this scheme will make towards meeting the city's housing need, whilst also bringing back into productive use a vacant brownfield site in a highly sustainable location, consistent with the Council's stated aspirations for this part of the city. I therefore strongly urge you to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Right. Jenny, is there any response you need to make to that?
I don't think there's anything to respond to.
Okay, thank you. I shall open it up to members' questions now, please. No Councillor Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. Let's go back to this open space question. Obviously, fairly close to this area, there is Norfolk Park, there's a Cora monument, so I'm relatively pleased with that. It also incorporates a gym and socialising area. I'm interested in the open spaces that are built into the landscaping, and I wonder if we could have a look at those to see how big they are.
If you go to the site plan, that one, there you go. So there are some small pockets of green space. Some of the one to the north of the site next to the car parking, that's going to be a wildflower meadow, or it's indicated as a wildflower meadow. The other pockets, as you go, start at the north at the top, that will be a more formal open space area. The wall will be lowered down slightly as you go along Queen's Road, so that there'll be a good public realm onto Queen's Road and the footpath. And then there'll be another formal area in front of the building near the main entrance, which is on the west of the oranged area there. So there are areas within the site. On the 10th floor there's the rooftop terrace as well, so that will provide some open space amenity. On that site plan, the orange area in the middle of the building, this is the ground floor unit. So that's an internal co-area, social area. So there will be quite a large area on the ground floor that's dedicated to sort of an internal area for chatting, meeting people. There's the gym that's marked on that plan as well. So that's the purple box to the west of the development. And then there's other spaces within the building. But to answer your question, the open spaces on that site plan are marked on in green.
Thank you. Can I ask another question? I've also noted the fact that there is a considerable amount being paid to the affordable housing requirement, which is good. I didn't get, and I can't remember having read it some time ago now, I can't remember if there was any of the units set aside for people with disabilities at all. Can you please remind me about that?
All of the units are of a relatively large size. There's none specified on the plans as such, but there's level access through the lifts to all of the units so that they could easily be converted into mobility housing if required.
Thank you.
I also have Councillor Holmshaw.
Peter has just said one of the questions, or the main question I was going to say, which was about affordable housing. But I think mine has a slightly different spin on it in terms of if the location is such a sustainable one with very easy public transport, walking and cycling can be done, surely that the housing on site should be affordable and this amount is not pushed off site. Why would that be the case? Why it has to be off site?
Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. The scheme is a build-to-rent scheme, and in a scheme such as this, there'll be maybe particularly high management costs that might not be suitable for affordable units for the future. The majority of the units in the development are 1 and 2 bedrooms. I believe that the requirement in this area is sort of for 2 to 3 bedroom family houses more than anything. So this development wouldn't provide what is actually required in the area at the moment. So the off-site contribution is considered to be a more appropriate route. Thank you.
Okay, right. I'll follow on to comments. And was that a comment you had, Brian?
It was actually just a quick follow-on, which was to do with if the need in the area is for 2 and 3 bed families, then that's what should be being supplied.
Unfortunately, this is the application we have before us, and we have to consider the application that we have before us. So I will pass on to comments now. Yeah, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points or questions, comments. I'm slightly concerned about for the 1-bedroom units are below what our normal standard is. They're only just below, but surely the standard is there to be maintained. And the whole issue of mental health and etc. That's quite important for these high-rise blocks. It's important that you have a decent living space. Secondly, and this is more of a question, how do we ensure that we get the money for the sports or open space? I mean, I note that Sports England have actually said they object to this application until there is a guarantee of that money, and I kind of feel the same way a bit.
I don't know that was necessarily a comment. I think you've got a question in there. There is a process whereby we have the monies allocated, and I'll ask Jenny to outline it. Thank you.
As regards to the legal agreement, so if you today approve the scheme, it will be granted subject to the legal agreement. So the legal agreement would need to be signed before the issue of the permission. And the legal agreement will have commencement dates in it. So depending on which type of legal agreement we go down, there'll either be pre-commencement, so that the money will get paid before a spade's dug in the ground, Sometimes it may be later on in the process, but in this type of development, it would normally be a pre-commencement condition or pre-commencement legal agreement. So the money would be obtained as soon as they commence development.
Okay, Brian. Okay, Richard, sorry, I'm going daft. Bear with me this afternoon. I've got a shocking headache and I'm not on form. So now I will pass to member comments. Any comments? Oh, Chris. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. Again, I'm going to support the application. Officer recommendation. I think another tall building, in my opinion, again, not tall enough, could have been a bit higher. We either build up with good quality high buildings or we build on green space. And I'd rather build up with good quality buildings. I think this is, from what I've read, good quality. I think it's in the right place for its sustainability because there's bus stops on both Queen's Road and Farm Road. You're less than 2 minutes, probably 3 or 4 if I walk it, from the tram stops, and you're a little bit further from the railway station. It's an excellent inner city development, and I fully support it, Chair, but could have been taller, in my opinion.
Thank you. I have no more comments that indicate... Oh, Councillor Holmshaw.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to follow on from Chris now, as you might expect, with the comment that actually, yes, I agree with densification. I think it's necessary in the climate we're in and the pressure we're under with the housing supply, but there is densification, and I don't think this is an appropriate development without an adjoining good green space. I think the space standards within some of the rooms are inappropriate, they're too small, and you will end up with what I can see as being a bit of a concrete corridor along Queen's Road. So I'm going to be voting against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thanks, Chair. I don't agree with that. I think it's the ideal building and the ideal site, and I fully support the officer recommendation thing. I think it's a building of quality, and as previous speaker said, we've got to build up if we're going to preserve our green belt, and I think Queen's Road is the ideal spot for it, really, Chair. So I'm fully supporting the officer recommendation.
Thank you. No more comments, so I will pass to the vote. And the officer recommendation is to grant conditionally subject to legal agreements. So for the reasons as outlined in the report, I'm going to go round the room. Councillor Garbutt.
I'm afraid I can't support this one. I shall be voting against.
Councillor Holmshaw.
As I indicated, I shall be voting against this application. Thank you.
Councillor Rosling-Josephs.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Pete Price.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Tony Dams.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Zahira.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Bob Mccann.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Andy Sangar.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Against the application.
Councillor Alan Woodcock.
For the application, Chair.
And last but not least, Councillor Garry Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair. For the application, Chair.
943 against, so that application is carried. Thank you very much. And we pass on to the next application, which is on page 101 on your agenda. So we do have some speakers against this, John. So if you're going out to take Mr. Breslin out. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. I'm sorry, we've got a bit of an interruption while we take Mr. Breslin out, and then we've got the two speakers will be waiting in the anteroom for when the officers finish the report. Oh, right, thank you very much. So the application that we're moving on to is application number 21/00366/FUL. It's in your application pack between pages 101 and 118, and it is it's a full planning application for the erection of a nursery with associated parking, and the location is 15A Broomfield Road at Stocksbridge. We'll wait until John comes back in so he can record any relevant discussion or decisions we make as part of the discussions, part of the item, and then we'll pass on to Dianne for the officer presentation, if we can. Thank you, John. Right, Dianne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from the slide on the screen, the site consists of part of the garden area of number 15A Broomfield Road and part of an area of unused land to the rear of the local shopping centre, which is at the junction of Lee Avenue and Knowles Lane. Lee Avenue, thank you. I was just going to say the garden area is separated from number 15A and its neighbours by a private access drive that runs to along the western side of the... Oh, can we go back a bit, Jay? Sorry, thanks. Thank you. It's separated from the residential properties to the west by a private access drive, and the site will be accessed via a service road which runs to the rear of the shops. You can just see the sort of right-hand eastern side of the red line boundary there. That road has no highway status, but it is actually owned by the council's housing department, and notice was served on the relevant department as part of the application process. Thanks, Jay. Next. In this slide you can see the entrance to the service road from Lee Avenue to the east. Next slide, please. And then in this slide you can see the entrance from Knowles Avenue. Next slide, please, Jay. This is a photograph of the service road with the proposed car parking area on the left of the screen. Next slide. Two more photographs of the parking area. The one on the left is taken from the service road. You can see the site in the background. The one on the right is taken closer to the entrance to the nursery. Next slide, please. These are photos of the garden area that is the site of the proposed nursery. Thank you. And in this slide, I'm sorry it's quite small, but we've got the proposed site plan on the right-hand side of the screen, with the nursery building, the sort of dark grey rectangle, positioned at the western end of the site, with the outdoor play area to the east, next to the car park. Just to note on that slide, you probably won't be able to see it, but we have a separation distance in excess of 21 metres between the nursery building and the dwelling houses to the west. We have 50 metres from the nursery to the flats above the shops, which are to the east. Of the 9 spaces in the car park, 5 will be reserved for parents and carers for dropping off children. The other 4 will be for staff. To the south of the nursery, you might just be able to make out the line of a dwelling house that was approved, granted planning permission in 2020. It's not been built yet, but that's the outline. And also worth mentioning that most of the existing boundary planting will be replaced with new laurel planting and a 2.2 metre high acoustic fence. If we go to the next slide. You can see this slide shows the nursery in elevation. It's a relatively simple, contemporary and functional building, similar in size to a single dwelling house. Its design is acceptable, but it will have little impact on the character and appearance of the area, given its position to the rear of the shops and the existing properties on Broomfield Road. And then the final slide shows the proposed floor plans. At the bottom of the screen, we've got the ground floor plan, which has a reception area and kitchen on the left-hand side, with the toddler and preschool rooms to the right, with direct access to the external play area. And then on the first floor, we have staff facilities on the left, the western side of the floor plan, and baby rooms on the right with access to the balcony. And then last of all, can I please draw members' attention to supplementary report item 4, and could we just go back a couple of slides to the site plan? Next one, thank you. Again, very small. There is a gate shown in the northwestern, or the very western corner of the site plan there. Now, the applicant has confirmed verbally that that's a pedestrian gate that will only be used for emergencies, but we've recommended a condition in order to prevent day-to-day use, which could result in undesirable highway or amenity impacts, and the recommended condition is there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Diana. We have speakers against this application. We have Katie Trail. So, okay, thank you. So, John's coming to fetch Katie into the room, so there'll be a very short interlude because she's sat in the anteroom. Hello, Katie. Thank you for coming to speak to us today, and welcome to the Planning and Highways Committee. John's explained to you how to use the microphone, so the floor is yours, 5 minutes at your convenience.
Thank you. So I'm Katie Trail. I'm resident of 17 Broomfield Road, and I'm here today to strongly object to this development. Today I'm representing the collective views of 15, 17, 19 and 21 Broomfield Road, which we feel are the 4 most impacted properties. Our strongest collective objection is to this being a commercial development in the centre of many quiet residential homes with natural landscape, established trees, hedges and wildlife. I really want to stress that we are not against development in its entirety, and actually I only purchased number 17 back in November, and it had planning permission for a residential development, which we were fine with, but the switch in categorisation to commercial is what's the concern. For the following reasons. The development plot is literally sandwiched between what is the garden of property 15 and a plot approved for plans to develop a detached residential dwelling. The second-storey development will compromise our privacy. The elevated windows will have vantage points to our rear and side, currently very private gardens, as well as looking directly into bedrooms and living rooms of properties 15 and 17. Residents at 17, 19 and 21, including myself and my husband, are full-time permanent home workers, so noise levels are of grave concern. The noise report carried out predicted sound levels of 57 decibels, which exceeded the maximum threshold accepted of 55 in a garden. The raised play area is concerning as well, as this could elevate this further. It is not clear whether this was factored into the noise report. And unsure whether the Peterborough nursery, which was the comparison, had a similar balcony. The environmental report states that there are no ponds in the surrounding area, when actually my property has a 5-metre pond within 30 metres of the development and is home to many frogs and newts, with new baby newts coming this summer. Those frogs and newts and wildlife also find habitat and comfort in the surrounding gardens and the development spot. I'd also just like to flag that we could see on the portal no bat report, when it has been known for many years that bats do live around these houses. The planning proposal states that it is there to increase much needed nursery provision in the local area, when within Stocksbridge and Deepcar areas we have early Steps Nursery, which takes children from 6 months, Royd Nursery taking children from 2+, Happy Hands taking children from 2+, and at least 5 Ofsted-approved preschool childminders taking children from 6 months. After speaking to some of the above-mentioned nurseries, they are struggling due to being undersubscribed, and this development will impact their business further. The modern aesthetic of the building is to be constructed in a combination of white and blue masonry paint and brickwork. This does not take into consideration the historic nature of its surrounding. The plot is a former Victorian properties garden, and the vast majority of the houses surrounding it are brick and stone. One of the drivers supporting this development seems to be about tidying up the area around the shops. The nursery itself will not actually be on this area. It will only be the car park, which will account for no more than a quarter of this space. We appreciate the planned switch to having the entrance moved to Lee Avenue, as Broomfield Road was unsuitable. However, the volume of traffic, lack of parking, poor sightlines and congestion around Lee Avenue when at peak seems like an accident waiting to happen to many locals. A large number of school children also use the public footpath to the side of the proposed entry point, which will mean that they need to cut across the car park to access the entrance to the footpath. I'm very passionate about sustainability, and maybe this is just me, but I cannot see any details on the building plans that use natural materials, sustainably sourced or recycled materials, and there is no mention of energy and water efficiencies. A final observation was that a majority of the supporters on the portal were not local to the area and are never likely to use or be impacted by this facility, unlike us, which is why we felt the need to come here today. In conclusion, the overwhelming concerns are about this modern commercial building in the middle of our residential homes and all that it brings with it: noise, privacy invasion, traffic, safety and disruption to wildlife and natural habitat. If this was a residential build, we would not be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Katie.
Thank you.
Could we have Abby Hayes in? We've got a speaker for the application who's Abby Hayes, so there'll be a couple of minutes while Katie goes out and Abby comes in. It's all very complicated when we have to keep our speakers not in the same room with us. Can't wait until we can, manage meetings in a more open and inclusive manner. I'm just thankful that speakers aren't now hidden away in the corner where we can't even see them while they're speaking to us. Thank you very much, John. Abby, hello, welcome. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. Thank you for coming and talking to us. You have 5 minutes at your convenience. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone, my name's Abby Hayes and I am the applicant for the erection of the nursery in Stocksbridge. So a little bit about my experience initially. I've worked in early years education for over 10 years now. And during that time, I actually used to be an MVQ assessor, which meant that I had to go around local settings within Sheffield. This is when I realised that there was a high demand for early years education in Stocksbridge.
And about 2 years ago, I began to look for land and do a little bit more research. I spoke to Harris Ali, who works for the Early Years Education Department, who also confirmed there was a high demand for early years education in Stocksbridge and Deepcourt area. There is one other private setting that offers a similar service to what I will be offering. And then other services that are available are local schools where they only take from children from 2 years onwards. Throughout the process of the application, we've worked closely with residents, and we do understand that there has been a high objection amount. So throughout the whole process, we've worked along with some of the residents, some of the locals, and we've actually done a redesign and resubmitted the planning application to try and support some of the views and the areas of that the community was objecting against. Some of those reasons obviously have been to do with the acoustics and the sounds. So we've worked with environmental services and come up with different ideas of trying to support and kind of incubate some of that noise. We have managed to get it to the legal requirement of 55 decibels. To the rear of the nursery, we will be making it so it's a sensory garden, and that will be used for all the SEND children and any behavioural needs that we do have. So that will be a quiet, tranquil area which will be the nearest to the residents. There is a gate which is at the bottom of the where it eliminates from Broomfields and the residential walkway. So that was initially put in to restrict any access to the building by local residents. However, this actually benefits because it will work as security measures and to support with health and safety. So we have limited access and it eliminates the public foot traffic there as well. This should then support with health and safety, and it will only be used for emergency access. So we've been able to work closely with the council. I've actually been in discussions with environmental enforcement agencies and the officers to try and support with the tidiness and cleaning of the derelict land as well. In terms of spaces, I've conducted some research and the car park will provide a total of 9 spaces, one of which will be disabled. The business plan will employ local staff, which we have already started to envision. Four of those car parking spaces will be made readily for staff, and the research that we've conducted will ensure that it reflects the amount of spaces that will be needed for the parents at drop-off time. The business hours will be 8 while 5, and parents will be able to come at kind of whatever times to drop the children off. This should then eliminate some of the congestion. When I've completed some research, I contacted 33 early years settings. There was only 12% that had more spaces than we are actually going to put at the nursery. Some of which, I think there was over 14 early years settings didn't have any early years spaces. The current setting that I work at, that has double capacity as what we are wanting to offer, and that actually only has 3 spaces, and all other parking is off-road. I think that's it. In terms of the amount of objections as well, there was quite a lot of Facebook groups and social media where there were certain community members asking to object for particular reasons. So I do think that this constitutes to the amount of objections that we are getting to similar nature as well. We also completed a virtual meeting during lockdown with Miriam Cates, who is the Stocksbridge MP, She remained impartial but did say that she would be able to support the setting if and when planning permission would be granted. Miriam also stated within the meeting that the majority of the letters that she'd received in COVID highlighted the actual lack of early years facilities in the area as well. And with the new Hollins Busk outline planning permission, that is going to ensure that there's another 85 houses going locally, along with another 300 to 400 houses in the Outerbridge and Warncliffe side area, and there'll still be a lack of early years facilities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Katie. Thank you. Dianne, would you like to respond to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I picked up some of the questions for the previous speaker. There was concern about, I mean, much of it is addressed in the report, in the committee report for members, but I'll just highlight a few points. There was a concern about being a commercial development in a housing area. Now, a range of uses are acceptable in housing areas, and certainly community uses and nurseries, such as the one proposed today, are acceptable in principle, subject to it not having any harmful impacts. In terms of privacy, as I described before and I showed you on the site plan, we do have acceptable privacy distances between windows. The properties to the west are separated by a shared access drive, and I said sufficient distance between windows. In terms of noise, the previous speaker said it failed, the proposal fails to comply with the recommended 55 dB. If I just set the scene a little bit, the nursery building is the area, the dark grey rectangle on the site plan. The play area is to the east of that. The nearest residential properties are to the west, over sort of about 40 metres away from the play area and screened by the nursery itself. The noise assessment showed that those properties to the west wouldn't be impacted in terms of noise. Any impact is going to be felt just in the gardens and only in the immediate area of the gardens to either side, that's to the north and the south. But importantly, with the acoustic fence that's proposed and with screens at either side of the balcony, the assessment found that the required or the recommended limit of 55 dB could be achieved. There was, as both speakers have said, there's been just about as much representations in support of the scheme as against it, and many of those in support were referring to the lack of facilities in the local area. In terms of the character of the area, it's very mixed. You have a row of stone properties to the west. You have a brick development of sort of more modern housing to the north, and then you have the local shopping centre and the parade of shops immediate to the east. A very mixed area, but in any case, the proposed development is going to be constructed from brick. And we're satisfied that given its sort of slightly tucked away location and its acceptable design, it's not going to have any harmful impacts. In terms of sustainability, it's not a major application. We can't require the applicant to install any sort of features. They don't have to provide 10% renewables as required by some of the UDP policies, it being a minor application. However, it is in a highly sustainable location. It's close to public transport, it's close to other facilities on the doorstep, such as the shops, and there's a community facility just to the south of Knowles Avenue, just off the site plan there to the south. And it's in the midst of the community it's likely to serve, so it's a highly sustainable location. In terms of ecology, the applicant's ecologist categorised it as having low ecological value. It's grassland with trees and shrubs along the boundary. There was no evidence on site of any protected species, and in that circumstance, again, you know, we can't resist the application, although the applicant has agreed to incorporate back boxes and they're reserved by condition. I can't remember which condition that is. I think it might be 17. And I think that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up to members' questions, and first is from Andy Sangar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm saying I did find the site visit useful. It is quite an awkward site. So in terms of highways and parking, I think we're quite used to schemes for residential in terms of houses and flats and the sort of numbers. How are we meant to judge whether 9 is appropriate for 46 small children and 8 to 10 or whatever members of staff? How do we get to, why is 9 the right number?
Okay, thank you, Andy. I think this is where Helen comes in.
Thanks, Chair. It is quite a difficult issue to deal with because the parking guidelines that are for nurseries just actually refer to the provision of drop-off and pick-up and don't actually give you any guidance in terms of number of spaces. The way in which we've looked at this is to sort of try and say, well, if we're allowing, say, 10 minutes for a person to drop off a child and pick them up, we've got 6 spaces, so in effect, each space can get used 6 times over an hour period. We've got 5 spaces, because obviously there are 4 for the staff. So in effect, you're looking at sort of 30 children being able to be accommodated in those 6 spaces over the hour period. And I appreciate there's obviously, you're saying there's 46 children there. I think we would not expect in any way that every child would be brought by car. As we say, it's in a highly accessible location, sustainable location. There may be siblings as well. So given that we're saying 46 children, the parking spaces can accommodate 30, we would only potentially expect something like sort of 50% of the children to be brought by car anyway. That's how we've come to the view that the parking is acceptable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I mean, clearly we must have got experience of other nurseries and what sort of proportion of parents go by car or walk. So in terms of emergency vehicle access, I mean, clearly this is, I mean, we're talking a very different scheme than if we were coming from Broomfield Road. I mean, I fully accept that, but we've got this sort of service road that we now understand is not highways, but it's council housing, and then we're building the car park on that. So in terms of fire services or ambulances or whatever, the new road surface will be up to their standards, and the fire authority will be able to get water hydrants. There's one sufficiently close.
Chair, in terms of the distance for the fire service, fire service, they can get close enough, yes. Again, it is something that will go through building regulations as well, but the width of the access and manoeuvrability, yes, they can get to the required distance. I do accept that the surface of the access isn't ideal. However, it is a third party, in a third party ownership, not the applicant's ownership.
And I think that's, but I mean, I accept it's a third party, and I accept that third party is Sheffield City Council. Would it be normal to put some sort of condition about the surface, because if we're now coming in from Lee Avenue, don't we need a decent surface from Lee Avenue to the car park?
Obviously, I think it would be preferable if the surface was improved. I think the issue from a highways perspective is that it wouldn't be reasonable justification to refuse the application. But yes, if that's what members considered to be appropriate, given that obviously consultation would have to be carried out with the housing department.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I also have Councillor Tony Dams indicating.
I think I've probably worked this out, but what does suboptimal in a local context mean? Does it mean it's not ideal? You don't mean it's not suitable? Just, I think it's a strange phrase, suboptimal.
Dinah?
It is a strange phrase, and I think it means it's not optimal. So it's not ideal. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think they were the words specifically used by the ecologist.
Councillor Brian Holmshaw.
Hello. Mention is made of an acoustic fence after the construction phase. I urge people to put in acoustic fences during the construction phase itself as well. I'm wondering whether this can be made into a condition. Secondly, on fencing, why not a hedgerow alongside the acoustic fence? This would help with biodiversity and also to help to camouflage the fence. The camouflaging the fence has been mentioned in one of the comments in the officer's report as well. So it's been a reduced height acoustic fence, or not a full height acoustic fence in the officer's report, so it's not visible to people in the gardens. So that was questions on fencing. I've also got a question on highways, which is random parking, and that we must have some data somewhere on places like nurseries where people drop off and pick up, and how they can be misused as well. So you might set the parking up, but people will park willy-nilly, and that causes a safety issue. I mean, is there any data on that at all, please?
Thank you. I'll pass over to Diana first, and then I'll bring Helen in. Thank you. Oh, Helen, if you come on, you've been quiet so long all afternoon, so please.
Sorry, Chair. In terms of specific data in parking around schools and nurseries, we don't have that data. The only thing that we would have, and that would be on a very site-specific basis, would be accident information, which is personal injury accident information, which is that which is recorded to the police. So in terms of, how many parents may injudiciously park, we don't have data on that. Obviously, we have reports come in via complaints in certain instances if that becomes a problem. But in terms of, can I provide you with, X number of parents will not park correctly, or it's going to create X number of on-street parking spaces, then no, we don't hold that data.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on a couple of the other points about the disimmunity noise construction. The applicant did actually submit a construction environmental management plan with the application, which our Environmental Services Protection Service felt was largely acceptable. However, there were a couple of elements that weren't quite satisfactory. So we've reapplied the condition 8 for an updated construction environmental management plan, and that will ensure that on-site activities, both during construction and afterwards, are sort of managed and minimise disimmunity. In terms of the boundary, again, the submission shows that a hedge and an acoustic fence will be erected along much of the boundary. However, again, we don't have full details. So we've got condition 13 recommended, which is will require the applicant to submit details of the site boundary treatment so that we can ensure the right balance of acoustic screening and hedging.
Okay. Do you want to come back?
Yes, please, thanks. Laurel would probably not be what the ecologist would put forward. So just wanted to point that out. If another substitute could be made, if this gets passed, then yes, that would be good, as from my point of view.
I agree, and I think Laurel's probably been chosen because it's fast growing and will provide sort of green screening fairly quickly, but I'm sure the applicant will be willing to consider, and we could add a directive or just willing to consider a mixed hedgerow that provides both the quick screening and some ecological value.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Richard Williams indicating. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of concerns I wish to raise. Firstly, regarding car parking. Small children and tight car parks are not a good combination, and that car park, based on the drawing, looks incredibly tight, especially with people coming in and out every 10 minutes. The lane itself isn't a particularly good one, as we've discussed, and it's not a particularly wide one, so I would question whether a car could come in while one is going out. So that gives me a real concern. The second one is over noise. In this session this afternoon, we talked about a guideline level of 55 decibels. But if you actually look at the British standards, it says it's desirable that external noise does not exceed 50 decibels, except in noisy environments. Well, I went along to the site visit, and one thing I was struck by was how quiet it was. It was deafeningly quiet. So I don't think we can use 55 decibels. So that is a concern as well. That's my points.
Thank you. Helen, do you want to come in about the car park? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, obviously we've looked at the site accesses. 2 cars can pass there as they come in. The car parking spaces are standard car parking spaces and aisle widths in terms of vehicles manoeuvring from the spaces. I completely agree that, you have to be cautious where you've got children and cars moving about, but I think what I would say is that the children will be escorted into the nursery by the parents. So on the balance, we feel that it is acceptable. Cars can pass where they need to pass, and the manoeuvring is acceptable.
Thank you, Dianne.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the noise query, it is a quiet site. We experienced that yesterday. It might have been a very particularly quiet moment that we were there. The noise assessment recorded ambient noise levels to be average of 46 to 47 dB, sort of traffic noise, general sort of household noise. During term time, kids passing the site, going to school, noise. 55 dB is an upper limit of sort of that's desirable for external areas. But the British standard recognises that it's not always possible to achieve 55 dB. In this case, they can achieve 55 dB with the acoustic barriers to the boundary and to the balcony. But I think you've got to remember that when they did the calculations, that was based on a worst case scenario with a lot of kids being out at the same time. And it was also worth remembering that we're talking about hours of use from 8 till 6, so we're not talking about quieter hours at the weekend and in the evenings. So I think on that basis we felt that, in any case they could achieve the recommended 55 dB, but all the assessment was done on a sort of worst case scenario.
Richard, do you want to come back?
Yeah, briefly, if I may, about the car parking. My concern wasn't so much the spaces between the cars. It was actually having sufficient space to reverse a car out. It looks, again, I'm not sure if it's a totally scaled drawing, but it almost looks as if you've got not much more than the length of a car to reverse out of, and I know that can be quite tricky.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the aisle width, as I was saying, is 6 metres, and that is what we would require.
I have one more speaker who's indicated that they wish to ask a question. That's Councillor Peter Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. We are taking this car parking bit a bit like a dog with a bone. Who owns the car park? Because it's not land that the applicant is aiming to own. I am I'm guessing. And is there an agreement that that car park can be, or that land can be changed into a car park? And another supplementary on that is what sort of surfacing will the car park have, because there may be flooding issues around there as well.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know who owns it. It is in a third-party ownership, am I right? Thank you. But obviously, the planning permission can't be implemented without that. Notice was served on the third party. I'm aware of that. And sort of being able to carry out the development will be subject to their approval going forwards. As with any planning application, you have to get planning permission, then all your other approvals. So it is in third-party ownership. In terms of the materials, condition 19 requires the car park to be constructed from permeable porous materials so that we can deal with, to prevent surface water runoff.
Thank you, Dianne. That okay, Peter? And I have one very final question from Councillor Garry Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's not on the car park. It's on the road in and out. You did mention that it belongs to Sheffield City Council highway housing. Is it in the report?
The fact that it's owned by... No, I don't think it says that in the report.
Right, that's good then, because I haven't seen it. I'm a bit reluctant really to pass something where we haven't got a signed seal agreement from Sheffield City Council to a third party access. You have got something then. You on?
They have served notice on Sheffield City Council. That is the proper procedure. You serve notice as an applicant on all owners of the land for which you are applying for planning permission. They haven't objected or provided any indication that they wouldn't accept. I mean, I think they've offered that as an alternative approach to the site.
So you're telling me that we've got something back then, and they're Sheffield City Council's happy with this road being used more frequently than what it is, and then any repairs, that's what I'm getting at, any repairs to this road is going to be down to Sheffield City Council. And is there any service agreement with, if this goes through today, with the new nursery, where, you know, if there's any repairs to that road, is it going to be 50-50? Is anything like that in place at this moment?
Thank you, Chair. That will be an agreement that has to be reached outside of the planning process. That's an agreement with two private parties. So for them to reach an agreement between themselves, you know, the housing department, if they want to ask the applicant to enter into such agreement, will have to do that outside the planning process.
Thank you, Dianne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a lot happier now. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll now move on to comments. Do I have any comments? Councillor Sangar.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I think before going any further, I would quite like to put in these two extra conditions. So firstly, some sort of condition about the road surfacing between whatever it is, Lee Road and the car park, to make sure that it's of sufficient standard. I would like that condition. The second thing is to pick up Councillor Brian Holmshaw's very good point about a natural acoustic barrier, and that it should of good ecological standard and not laurel or leylandi, something that actually brings wildlife in. So I would like to move that as an amendment to add those two conditions in first before we do anything else.
Right, thank you. Dianne, do you want to come back on that? Because my question would be, could you have a condition in a planning application where one of the conditions applied to a third party?
I think it would be difficult for us to enforce a condition that is completely reliant on the actions of a third party. I think it's something that has to be agreed, between the two sort of private landowners, neighbouring landowners. We can add a directive that advises the applicant to seek the agreement of the housing authority or the housing department to improve the surface of the access road. I think that would be the most that we could do lawfully.
I mean, I'm happy to take a directive if we can't have a condition. And how about the acoustic barrier?
I mean, again, it's about what's reasonable and I mean, if members felt that it was reasonable and necessary for the boundary treatment to have some ecological value, we could amend condition 13, which asks for details of the boundary treatment and incorporate an element of greenery with ecological value.
I can see nods all around the room, so is that something that this meeting would wish to agree to? So we have a slightly amended condition and a directive. Councillor Holmshaw, you wish to make a comment?
I just want a bit of clarity on that in terms of there being an acoustic barrier, but also a hedgerow that will, or similar, that will grow up. So that is what's been proposed.
Have we got that, Dianne?
Well, part of the scheme is the acoustic barrier, and condition 13 is just sort of, I suppose, seeking those finer details in terms of what it's going to look like. But certainly, and the plans already indicate that there'll be a hedgerow. I think there's nothing wrong with us adding a few words to say that the hedgerow element of the boundary treatment will have some ecological value.
So we have a directive and a condition. I'll take the directive first. Are the meeting happy to, I'll just take a show of hands. Are the meeting happy to agree to that? Yes. And the condition to add the words that the planting has ecological value. Is the meeting happy to agree to that? Fine, that's great. Both of those are passed. So I propose to move to the vote now. So the officer's recommendation is to grant this full planning application conditionally. So, as for the reasons as set out in the report, with the additional condition and the amended condition and the directives, so we've got the whole kit and caboodle together. I shall go around the room, starting with Councillor Garbutt.
I'll go with the officer's recommendation on this.
Councillor Holmshaw.
I would also go with the officer's recommendation in this case.
Councillor Rosling-Josephs.
For the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Price.
Fully support the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Dams.
For the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
For, Chair.
Councillor McCann.
For the officer recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Davison.
For, Chair.
Councillor Sangar.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, for Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Woodcock.
For the recommendation, Chair.
And Councillor Weatherall.
For Chair.
Right, thank you very much. I make that that application is carried. That comes to the end of the planning applications today, so thank you very much for your time and effort and consideration putting into that. We have item 8 on the agenda is a record of appeals, submissions and decisions for noting, and there's nothing, I don't have anything that I've had pointed out to me that I should bring the meeting's attention to. The date of the next meeting is Tuesday the 7th of September at 2 p.m. So I'll see you then, and thank you very much. Thank you.